They say power is just another kind of faith, believing you can control what was never meant to obey. But faith turns to fear when the gold you prayed for drips red under light that's too honest. I used to think the world was divided neatly, good men, bad men, the rest of us trying to survive between them. Then I met him, and suddenly the lines blurred into something that looked too much like desire. It was raining the first time I saw him. Not the soft kind of rain that smells like renewal, but the kind that makes the city look like it's been crying for years. I remember the sound more than the sight, the way the drops hit the pavement like whispered confessions. The street outside his building glowed with reflections from luxury cars and dying street lamps. The world around him didn't just move, it obeyed. Inside, his world was a cathedral of glass and steel. The kind of office where even silence felt expensive. Everything gleamed, marble floors polished to a mirror's edge, walls so white they could blind you if you stared too long. Yet beneath that perfection, there was a chill. The kind of cold that doesn't come from air conditioning, it comes from power. He stood near the window, back turned, framed by the city lights. The man my fiancé called the boss. The man who owned half the city without ever needing to raise his voice. Adrian Moretti. That name had weight. You didn't say it casually, it felt like glass in your mouth, beautiful, sharp, and dangerous. When he turned, the world seemed to pause. His suit was black, simple, immaculate. The kind that made other men straighten their ties and women forget their breath. His eyes, grey like uncut metal, didn't wonder, didn't question. They assessed. And when they found mine, it was like he'd already read every secret I hadn't dared to think yet. "Miss Hart," he said, his voice calm enough to quiet the rain. "You're early." I nodded, though I didn't know what else to do. My fiancé, Daniel, had told me to deliver a file. That was all. "He just needs you to sign it," I managed. He didn't move. Not at first. His gaze flicked toward the folder in my hand, then back to my face. A small, knowing pause. Daniel sends his fiancée to deliver contracts now? The way he said fiancé made my stomach twist. Not mockery. Just observation. A quiet reminder that he saw through everything. I crossed the distance to his desk, every step echoing against marble, every heartbeat sounding too loud. The air felt charged, heavy with something unsaid. He took the folder, his fingers brushing mine for just a second. The touch was brief, almost accidental, but I felt it like an electric pulse through my skin. My throat went dry. He opened the file, scanned it without sitting down. "Your fiancé works fast," he murmured. "He likes to impress you," I said, forcing a small smile. His eyes lifted, and the corner of his mouth curved. Not a smile, more like a reaction he allowed for half a second before erasing it. "That's dangerous." I frowned. "Impressing you? Trying too hard." The words hung there, simple but weighted. He looked away, back toward the rain-streaked city, and for a moment, I caught something unguarded in his reflection. Loneliness, maybe. Or exhaustion buried too deep to name. "You can tell Daniel the deal is approved," he said finally. His tone was polite, detached. But his eyes stayed on the glass, on the distorted skyline. I turned to leave, relieved and strangely disappointed at once. "Miss Hart." I froze at the door. His voice had shifted, lower, quieter, with an undercurrent I couldn't define. "Be careful," he said. "This city doesn't forgive mistakes." The way he said it, it wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Almost concern. I nodded once, unsure if my pulse or the thunder outside was louder. When I stepped out, the night air hit me like a confession. The rain had eased to a drizzle, soft but cold. I stood under the awning, clutching the folder, staring at the reflection of his building in a puddle. It looked endless, tall, dark, beautiful. A mirror of him. Daniel called a few minutes later, his voice bright, proud, and distracted. He asked if everything went well, and I said yes. He didn't ask if I met his boss. He didn't hear the tremor in my voice. But Adrian's words stayed with me, looping like a secret I didn't want to keep. This city doesn't forgive mistakes. That night, I dreamt of grey eyes watching me from behind glass, unblinking, patient, waiting. I told myself it meant nothing. That he was just another man in Daniel's world of briefcases and quiet corruption. But the truth was simpler. For the first time in years, I felt seen. And it terrified me. The next morning, I caught myself standing in front of the mirror longer than usual, fixing my hair, touching the faint line of my lips, remembering how his gaze had felt. It wasn't right. I knew that. But guilt and curiosity are close cousins. By the end of the week, Daniel mentioned him again, casually over dinner. Adrian wants us at the club Friday. He's throwing something for the investors. I tried to sound uninterested, stirring my wine. Adrian. He smiled. Moretti. You'll like him once you get to know him. He's not what people say. Not what people say. No. He was exactly what they said. Power dressed in civility, danger disguised as elegance. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I wanted to see that again. The loneliness I thought I saw in his reflection. The club was a masterpiece of excess, velvet shadows, amber lights, the low hum of jazz melting into whispered conversations. Everyone there looked like they were pretending not to be afraid of the man who owned it all. When Adrian appeared, the room adjusted around him. Not a single announcement, not a word, just an instinctive shift. Conversations softened. Glasses lowered. Eyes followed. Daniel led me to him. Adrian, this is. I remember, Adrian said, eyes meeting mine for the second time. Miss Hart. I should have looked away. I didn't. His gaze lingered, steady, unreadable. The kind of look that asked questions without words. Daniel was still talking, I think, about numbers, plans, alliances, but the sound faded beneath the weight of that silent exchange. In that moment, I knew something had already begun. Not love. Not even attraction. Something deeper, quieter, more dangerous. The kind of thing that waits in the dark until you mistake its patience for safety. Later that night, as laughter filled the room and Daniel's hand rested casually on mine, Adrian's voice drifted through the crowd. Low, calm, detached. This city doesn't forgive mistakes. When our eyes met again, I understood what he meant. It wasn't the city he was warning me about. It was himself. Light can make anything look innocent, even sin. That's what I kept telling myself when I stood under the chandelier's gold shimmer at the club again, pretending the diamonds of light spilling down my skin were something other than reflections of danger. It had been 2 weeks since I first met Adrian Moretti, and yet his presence had a way of haunting ordinary things. My mornings felt heavier, the mirror sharper. The air itself seemed to hold his quiet command, even when he wasn't near. Daniel didn't notice. He was too busy chasing ambition, working late, answering calls in rooms that smelled like money and deceit. He belonged to that world now, and by extension, so did I. The problem was, I wasn't built for it. Or maybe I was, and that frightened me most. The night of the charity gala was supposed to be harmless. It was Daniel's idea. Network, smile, pretend we were a perfect couple untouched by the undercurrents that ran beneath every glass of champagne. I told myself I could do that. I could play the part. Until I saw Adrian again. He stood at the far end of the ballroom, half in shadow, half bathed in the pale gold of chandeliers. The black suit again, but this time without the tie, his collar undone just enough to make the entire room look overexposed. Every conversation, every polite laugh seemed to move around him like planets forced to orbit a silent sun. When his gaze found me across the crowd, something inside me stilled. It wasn't fear, though maybe it should have been. It was recognition, the kind you feel in your bones before your heart catches up. He didn't approach immediately. He never rushed. He was a man who understood time was another form of control. Daniel excused himself to speak with a politician, leaving me near the bar. My glass trembled slightly as I lifted it, watching the reflection of the man I wasn't supposed to notice. Then he was beside me. Quietly, as though the air had shifted to let him in. "Miss Hart," he said softly, the sound of my name folding into the music. "Mr. Moretti," I replied, proud of how steady my voice sounded. His eyes flicked toward my hand, the one holding the glass. "You're shaking." "I'm cold." He glanced around. "No, you're not." The smallest smile threatened my lips. "Do you always observe people like this? It keeps them honest." "I thought honesty wasn't a currency in your world." He tilted his head, studying me. "That's what makes it valuable." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it hummed. My pulse throbbed in my ears, and I had to look away, afraid he might see the truth written too clearly on my face. He leaned slightly closer, not enough for anyone to notice, but enough for me to feel the warmth of him. "Does Daniel know you don't like these events?" I hesitated. "He thinks I'm adjusting." "And are you?" My breath caught. "I'm trying." "Don't." The single word landed like a command wrapped in concern. I turned to him, confused. "Don't try to belong to something that doesn't deserve you," he said quietly. My throat tightened. "That's not your decision to make." A faint shadow crossed his expression. Approval, maybe. Or admiration. "You're braver than you look." "I'm not brave. Just tired of pretending." Something in his gaze softened, just for a heartbeat. "That," he murmured, "is bravery." For a moment, the room faded. The music dimmed, the laughter blurred. It was just him and me, and the quiet between us that felt dangerously like truth. Then Daniel's voice cut through it, loud, bright, unknowing. "There you are." Adrian straightened, every trace of intimacy gone. The transformation was instant, a wall rebuilt. "Daniel," he greeted, his tone smooth again, "all business." Daniel clapped him on the shoulder, oblivious to the current that had just shifted. "You've met my fiancé, of course. I'm lucky, right?" Adrian's gaze didn't move from mine. "You are," he said, his voice even, unreadable. Later, as we drove home, Daniel was cheerful, talking about deals, names, opportunities. I watched the city lights streak past the window like falling stars, trying to convince myself I hadn't crossed an invisible line. But something had changed. The next day, I found myself at the small bookstore near my apartment, trying to ground myself in something normal. The smell of paper and dust felt safe. I wandered the aisles aimlessly, until I heard that voice again. "I didn't take you for a reader." I turned, startled. He stood there, casual this time, in a dark coat and gloves, blending into the quiet space like he belonged to every shadow in it. My heart stuttered. "You're following me?" "No," he glanced at the books in my hands. "Coincidence?" "Right," I said, skeptical. He stepped closer, the faint scent of rain clinging to him. "I had a meeting nearby." I didn't believe him. He didn't seem to care if I did. He looked at the book I was holding, Wuthering Heights. His lips curved slightly. "Tragic love story. You like pain, Miss Hart." I met his gaze. "Maybe I just like honesty." He studied me for a long moment. "Then you'll hate most of what you see in my world." "Maybe I already do." Our eyes locked, and something unspoken passed between us, an understanding that went beyond words. We both knew this was wrong. That every second stretched the boundary between curiosity and betrayal thinner. And still, neither of us stepped back. He took the book gently from my hands, tracing its worn spine with his thumb before setting it down. "Be careful what you reach for," he said. "You might not like what reaches back." And then he left. Just like that. I stood there, the air still carrying his voice, his scent, his warning. That night, I couldn't sleep. The city outside my window buzzed softly, neon lights flickering, tires hissing against wet asphalt. Daniel was at another meeting. Alone in the dark, I caught my reflection in the glass and barely recognized myself. Was it guilt that kept me awake? Or fascination? Maybe both. I kept hearing Adrian's voice in my mind, "Don't try to belong to something that doesn't deserve you." But the truth was, I was already entangled. Maybe not in his world yet, but in him. And deep down, I knew that if fate wanted to destroy me, it had already chosen the perfect weapon. Some people enter your life quietly, like a whisper through an open window. Others arrive like a storm you mistake for fresh air. Adrian Moretti was both. Weeks passed, and I kept telling myself I wouldn't see him again. That the universe would correct what it had carelessly set in motion. But fate doesn't correct. It repeats. Our next encounter happened by accident, or what I thought was one. Daniel had invited me to his office downtown, promising lunch, but when I arrived, he was gone. The receptionist smiled politely, told me he'd been called into a meeting with Mr. Moretti and would be back soon. I should have left. Instead, I waited. The office was cold and quiet, glass walls reflecting fragments of the skyline. The longer I sat there, the heavier the silence grew, until the door opened. "Miss Hart." His voice again, smooth, calm, and impossibly controlled. I turned. Adrian stood in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his forearms. His presence filled the space without effort. The man was a study in restraint, danger refined into grace. "I didn't know you were here," I said, my voice smaller than I meant it to be. He stepped closer, unhurried. "Daniel's running late. I told him to meet me elsewhere." "Oh." I hesitated, unsure if that meant I should go. "You can wait here," he said, walking past me. The faint scent of his cologne, cedar, smoke, something darker, hung in the air. "Or I can have someone drive you home." "I'll wait," I said quickly. He looked over his shoulder, faint amusement flickering in his eyes. "You don't like being told what to do you?" "I don't like feeling dismissed." He leaned against the edge of Daniel's desk, arms crossed. "Then don't be." The words landed like a challenge, soft but deliberate. He wasn't flirting. It was something else. Recognition, maybe. "I'm not sure what that means," I said. "It means stop apologizing for taking up space." I didn't answer. Instead, I looked out the window, the city below moving like machinery, cold and relentless. "You make it sound easy." It isn't. But neither is surviving. His tone carried something that made me turn back. For the first time, I saw the fatigue beneath his calm, the kind that didn't come from work but from living too long in a world that demanded constant vigilance. "Do you ever get tired of it?" I asked quietly. "The control, the power?" He studied me for a long moment, and I wondered if I'd crossed a line. Then he said, "Power isn't about control, Miss Hart. It's about protection. People like me don't crave it, we bleed for it." His honesty caught me off guard. I didn't know what to say. So I just looked at him, really looked, and saw the faint scar near his jawline, the way his knuckles bore old marks that didn't match the elegance of his world. "Adrian," I said before realizing I'd used his first name. Something in his eyes shifted, surprise, faint but visible. "You shouldn't call me that." "Then you shouldn't look at me like that," I whispered. Silence. Only the low hum of the city below. He exhaled slowly, as though steadying himself. "You're engaged." "I know. And you're still standing here." "I know that too." For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us pulsed, alive, forbidden, inevitable. Then the sound of footsteps in the hallway broke the spell. Daniel's voice filtered through the door, laughing, oblivious. Adrian straightened, composure sliding back into place like armor. When Daniel entered, he was all energy, unaware of the storm he'd just interrupted. "Sorry, babe, you've met Adrian already, right?" I nodded, my heart still racing. "Yes." Adrian didn't look at me again. Not once. But when I left the office later, a black car was parked at the curb. The window lowered just enough for his voice to reach me. "Get in." I froze. "What?" He didn't repeat himself. Against every rational thought, I did as he said. The door closed, sealing me inside the quiet hum of the vehicle. "I'm taking you home," he said simply, eyes fixed on the road ahead. I could have taken a cab. "I know." The city lights flickered across his face as we drove, painting him in fragments, half man, half myth. "You shouldn't do this," I said softly. "I already have." His hands tightened slightly on the wheel. "You don't belong in Daniel's world. You're trying to convince yourself that you do, but I see the way you look at it." "And how's that?" "Like it's a cage you're trying to decorate." The truth hit harder than I expected. "You don't know me." "Maybe not," he said, "but I know the look of someone trying to escape quietly." We drove in silence for a while after that, the rain beginning to fall again. Soft, relentless. The kind that erases sound, leaving only heartbeat and thought. When we stopped outside my apartment, I hesitated, hand on the door handle. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, "Because you look at me like I used to look at the world. Before I learned better." I didn't understand what he meant until much later. I stepped out, closing the door gently, and watched his car disappear into the wet night. Inside, everything felt too still. My heart wouldn't slow down. That night, I dreamed again, gray eyes, rain, and a whisper that felt almost like a promise. "You're trying to decorate your cage." The next day, I found a small envelope slid under my door. No name, no note, just a single black card embossed with an address and time. Every instinct screamed, "Don't go." But curiosity is a dangerous mercy. It convinces you that understanding the fire will stop you from burning. By dusk, I was standing outside an abandoned art gallery in the industrial district, rain dampening my hair. A single light glowed from inside. When I entered, Adrian was there. Alone. He turned, his expression unreadable. "You came." "I shouldn't have." "Probably not." I swallowed hard. "Then why ask me?" He took a step closer, the echo of his shoes filling the empty space. "Because I wanted to see if you'd listen to fear or truth." "I don't know the difference anymore," I admitted. He studied me for a long time, then said quietly, "Neither do I." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us held too much, curiosity, defiance, something dangerously close to longing. He moved to a painting leaning against the wall, an unfinished portrait. "This was my mother's," he said softly. "Before everything changed." I hadn't expected that. The vulnerability in his voice unraveled something in me. "What happened?" I asked. He looked at me then, and the shadows in his eyes deepened. "Power happened." The rain outside thickened, streaking the windows. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat closed around the words. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint line of exhaustion at the corner of his eyes. "You should go," he said finally. "Do you want me to?" He hesitated. That was answer enough. When I finally turned to leave, he said my name, soft, deliberate, as if tasting it for the first time. Lena. I froze. If you stay near me, he said, you'll forget what safety feels like. I looked back at him. Maybe I already have. Outside, the rain swallowed the city whole. Inside, I left behind the last unbroken piece of who I used to be. The weeks after the gallery blurred into grey. I tried to anchor myself in ordinary things. Coffee, morning news, Daniel's half-hearted smiles, but nothing felt solid. Every sound reminded me of him. Every quiet moment carried his voice like an echo I couldn't silence. I told myself it was guilt. That I felt this way because I had betrayed something. Daniel, loyalty, myself. But guilt fades. This didn't. It deepened. Daniel grew busier, buried in meetings and whispers I wasn't allowed to hear. I started noticing things. New men in suits around his office, phone calls ending the moment I entered the room, tension beneath his casual charm. One night, he came home later than usual, his shirt creased, his tone distracted. Adrian's tightening security, he said, almost to himself. I froze mid-motion. Why? He shrugged. Something about threats, bad timing, whatever. You don't have to worry about it. But I did. Because the moment he said Adrian's name, my heart reacted before my mind could. That weekend, Daniel asked me to drop off a folder at one of Adrian's warehouses outside the city. I should have refused, but curiosity disguised itself as obedience. Maybe I wanted to see him again. Maybe I wanted to remind myself why I shouldn't. The warehouse sat by the docks, hidden behind rows of shipping containers. The air smelled of salt and rust. 2 men at the entrance checked the folder, then waved me inside. Adrian stood in the middle of the wide concrete floor, surrounded by crates and silence. He wasn't in a suit this time. Dark sweater, sleeves pushed up, the image of a man still dangerous even without armor. His eyes met mine immediately. Surprise flickered there, then something else, concern. Lena, he said quietly, walking toward me. You shouldn't be here. Daniel asked me to bring this, I said, holding up the folder. He took it without looking down. He shouldn't have. Why? He didn't answer. Instead, he looked past me toward the entrance, scanning the shadows. Did anyone follow you? I frowned. No. Why would they? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because someone's been watching me. Watching my people. And I don't like coincidences. Something cold tightened in my chest. You think Daniel's involved? His gaze softened, just barely. I think Daniel is reckless. And I think you're standing too close to the edge of something you don't understand. I wanted to ask what that meant, but a sharp sound cut through the air, a metallic clatter from the far corner of the warehouse. Adrian's hand moved faster than thought, gripping my wrist and pulling me behind one of the crates. My pulse spiked, the sudden proximity stealing my breath. I could feel the heat of his body against my back, the steady rhythm of his breathing inches from my ear. He whispered, "Stay still." The air thickened. 2 men appeared near the entrance, murmuring in a language I didn't recognize. Adrian's body shifted slightly, shielding mine as he watched them. I could feel the tension in him, coiled and waiting. When the men finally left, the silence that followed was deafening. He didn't move right away. Neither did I. When he finally exhaled, it brushed the back of my neck, warm, steady, painfully human. I turned slowly. His hand was still on my wrist. His eyes caught mine, and for the first time, the calm cracked. There was something raw there, fear, anger, something heavier. You shouldn't have come, he said again, softer this time. You keep saying that, I whispered. But you never tell me to stay away. The words slipped out before I could stop them. He let go, stepping back, his control snapping into place like a door slamming shut. Because I don't waste words on things I can't control. I wanted to ask if I was one of those things, but I already knew the answer. Before I could speak, a phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, jaw tightening. Daniel's on his way. Here. Yes. He shouldn't see you. He guided me toward a side exit, hand hovering near my back but never touching. Go home. And, Lena. I turned. His voice lowered, rough around the edges. Next time, if Daniel asks you to do something that involves me, don't. I wanted to say I wouldn't, but lying to him felt worse than the truth. When I stepped into the cold air outside, my hands were trembling. I didn't know if it was from fear or something else entirely. That night, Daniel returned home tense and irritable. Long day? I asked carefully. He gave a short laugh. You could say that. Adrian's been distracted. Distracted. He shrugged. Probably something personal. You know how he gets. No, I thought. You don't. I didn't ask more. But later, when Daniel fell asleep beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The memory of Adrian's voice, calm under pressure, sharp when it needed to be, wouldn't leave me. Somewhere between guilt and fascination, a realization bloomed quietly. I wasn't just drawn to him. I trusted him. And that terrified me more than anything. A few days later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. One message. If you're going to ask questions, do it where no one can hear you. Hey. My breath caught. He shouldn't have reached out. But the truth was, I wanted him to. That evening, I met him at a small cafe tucked between old buildings on the quieter side of the river. It was almost empty, the kind of place where secrets didn't echo. He was already there, seated in a corner, black coffee untouched. You shouldn't text me, I said, sliding into the seat opposite him. He raised an eyebrow. You shouldn't have replied. I tried not to smile. Then why are we both here? He looked down for a moment, as if the answer was something he didn't want to say aloud. Because pretending doesn't work anymore. The words hit harder than I expected. For a while, we sat in silence, the hum of quiet music filling the space. Outside, the city lights reflected off the river like scattered glass. Daniel's in trouble, isn't he? I finally asked. Adrian's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped an octave. Yes. What kind of trouble? The kind that ends everything if you choose the wrong side. And which side is right? His eyes met mine. There isn't one. The truth hung between us, heavy and inescapable. I didn't know if I wanted to run or reach for him. He leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. You don't owe loyalty to destruction, Lena. I owe loyalty to the people I love. Even if they'd burn you to stay warm? My breath faltered. That's not fair. He nodded. No. But it's real. Outside, the wind shifted, scattering leaves against the window. I felt the quiet pull between us again, unspoken, dangerous, inevitable. When I left the cafe, his voice followed me into the night. If you ever need protection, you call me. No hesitation. I didn't turn back. But the sound of his words stayed with me, threading through my thoughts long after the city went dark. That night, as thunder rolled in the distance, I realized something had changed irreversibly. This wasn't fascination anymore. It was gravity. And gravity doesn't ask for permission. It only pulls. The storm came the same night the truth started bleeding through the cracks. Rain lashed against the city, fierce and unrelenting, the kind that made the streets shine like broken glass. Daniel was gone again. Some late meeting, another promise. I stopped asking questions. The answers always sounded rehearsed. I tried to drown the silence with music, with wine, with anything that didn't sound like his absence. But when my phone buzzed, my chest tightened before I even looked. "You shouldn't be alone tonight." I hesitated. The screen glowed like temptation itself. "You shouldn't be texting me." Maybe not. But it's safer that way. Safe for who? Both of us. The message sat there, daring me to decide what safety even meant anymore. I didn't remember grabbing my coat. Only the sound of thunder as I stepped into the night. His penthouse was a fortress in the sky, glass walls overlooking a city that never looked back. The elevator doors opened into silence, the kind that felt deliberate. He was standing by the window when I entered, back turned, a glass of scotch in one hand. The skyline shimmered behind him like a reflection of his control. Sharp, cold, perfect. "You shouldn't have come," he said without turning. "You invited me. I warned you." Those sound the same now. He finally looked over his shoulder. The faint light from the city caught the angles of his face, the exhaustion, the restraint, the danger always simmering just beneath the calm. His tie was loosened, shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked less like a myth and more like a man trying not to fall apart. "You didn't answer my question," I said softly. "Safe for who?" He stared at me for a long moment before answering. "You don't understand what happens to people who get close to me." "Then explain it." He turned fully, setting the glass down. "Everyone who matters to me either leaves or dies. And I've learned which one hurts less." Something twisted in my chest. "You think keeping people away protects them?" "It protects me from remembering what it feels like to lose." The honesty in his voice was heavier than anger. It carried a quiet kind of pain, the kind people learn to wear like armor. "Who did you lose?" I asked. He hesitated, jaw tightening. "My brother." The words came low, like they'd been buried for years. "He was 17. Wrong place, wrong debt. I tried to fix it. I didn't make it in time." He looked away then, hands clasped loosely in front of him. "That's when I learned power isn't about choice. It's about consequence." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The rain outside softened to a whisper, the city's glow turning pale and distant. "I'm sorry," I said. He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Don't be. It's just the truth. And truth doesn't care who apologizes for it." The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was fragile. Something unspoken shifted in the air, something that felt like trust trying to exist where it shouldn't. "Adrian," I said quietly, and this time, he didn't stop me from using his name. "You don't have to keep carrying it alone." He exhaled sharply, a trace of frustration. At me, at himself, maybe at the idea that I could see through him. "You think I have a choice?" "You always have a choice." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw it, the exhaustion behind his discipline, the longing behind his silence. "And what choice would you have me make, Lena?" "Let someone see you." He stepped closer, slow, measured. "You think you're ready to see what that looks like?" I didn't move. "I already have." For a moment, something broke in his expression. The mask slipped. The storm outside flickered across his eyes. Light, shadow, memory. He whispered, "You should go." I didn't. Not until he took a breath that sounded too much like surrender. "You don't know what you're doing." "Maybe not," I said, "but neither do you." He almost smiled, and for a moment, he looked younger. Like the boy who lost his brother before the world hardened around him. The thunder rolled closer, and the lights flickered. Without thinking, I stepped toward the window, watching lightning fracture the horizon. Behind me, I heard him move, the soft rustle of fabric, the faint click of a lighter. the scent of smoke and rain mixed in the air. You ever wonder, I asked, if all this money, control, fear, was worth what it cost? He took a slow drag of his cigarette, exhaled toward the glass. Every night. And what do you tell yourself? That it's too late to turn back. I turned to face him. That's not an answer. It's the only one that lets me sleep. There was no arrogance in his tone now, no intimidation. Just weariness. It made him more dangerous in a different way, because it made him real. I walked closer, the storm outside echoing the rhythm in my chest. Maybe you don't sleep because you're not meant to. Maybe some people aren't supposed to forget. His eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, something like admiration flickered there. And what are we supposed to do instead? Remember, I whispered. He didn't move for a long time. Then quietly he said, you make it sound easy to forgive the past. I didn't say forgive. I said remember. There's a difference. He nodded once, as if he understood too well. For a few seconds, the world outside disappeared. The rain, the thunder, even the city's noise. It was just the two of us, standing in a silence heavy enough to change everything. Then his phone buzzed on the table. A name flashed across the screen. Daniel. I looked at him. He didn't answer immediately. The air between us tensed, electric. You should go, he said again, voice low, unreadable. But when I turned to leave, his hand brushed mine. Barely a touch. But enough. It wasn't desire, it was recognition. The acknowledgement of something neither of us had language for. Outside, the storm had eased. The city glowed faintly beneath a curtain of mist. As I walked away, I realized that for all his power, Adrian Moretti was more human than anyone in Daniel's perfect world. And that was what made him dangerous. Because the moment you see someone's scars, you start wanting to protect them, even when you shouldn't. That night, lying awake beside Daniel, I replayed every word, every look. I told myself it didn't mean anything. That I was imagining it. But somewhere between guilt and longing, I whispered a truth I couldn't take back. He's breaking, and I'm the one who knows it. It happened on a night the city refused to sleep. Rain again. Of course it was rain. It had become the rhythm of us. The sky cracked open over glass towers, washing everything in reflections that looked too much like memory. Daniel was out of town. A business trip, he'd said. His absence had stopped feeling temporary. It felt strategic. Like the universe was making space for a mistake to happen. I didn't plan to see Adrian. But fate doesn't ask for permission. It whispers, and we listen. He texted me only 2 words. I need you. No location, no context. And yet I knew exactly where to go. The old art gallery. The same one from before. The one that still smelled faintly of paint, salt, and ghosts. When I entered, he was standing where I'd last seen him, near the half-finished portrait of his mother. The light was softer this time. Candles flickering on a nearby table, their glow trembling with every movement of air. He looked different. The control was still there, but it was fraying at the edges. His tie was gone, his shirt unbuttoned at the throat, and his eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that came from fighting something invisible. You came, he said quietly. You asked. He gave a faint nod, as if that truth cost him something. I shouldn't have. I took a step closer. But you did. His gaze dropped, then lifted again, and for the first time, there was no armor, no distance. Just a man standing in the wreckage of his own restraint. Daniel's been making mistakes, he said, voice low. Deals with people I don't trust. He's getting himself into something he won't survive. Fear flickered in my chest. Then stop him. I've tried. He shook his head. He doesn't listen anymore. He thinks power protects him. And you? His eyes met mine. I know better. I hesitated, then whispered, why tell me? Because you're the only one who still sees him as a person, not a pawn. His jaw tightened. And because I need you to understand what's coming. The weight of his words pressed against the silence. What's coming? War. The word felt too big, too final. Between who? Between everyone who ever pretended to be loyal. He turned away, running a hand through his hair, tension radiating from every movement. I thought I could keep you out of it, but I was wrong. I stepped closer, barely breathing. Why me, Adrian? He stilled. Why protect me? He turned then, slow, deliberate, eyes sharp and pained all at once. Because I can't stop thinking about you. The room seemed to inhale. My pulse roared in my ears. You don't mean that. I've tried not to, he said, voice breaking on the edge of truth. But every time I close my eyes, you're there. Every time Daniel says your name, it feels like a threat. He took a step toward me, and my body betrayed me, frozen, trembling, alive. Adrian. He stopped inches away. The candlelight painted his face in gold and shadow. His hand hovered near my cheek but didn't touch. Tell me to stop, he whispered. I should have. I didn't. The air between us was fragile, alive, and when he finally closed the distance, it wasn't a decision, it was inevitability. The kiss wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft or cautious. It was desperate, like the breaking point of every moment we'd pretended not to feel. His hand found the side of my neck, his touch firm but reverent, as though he was terrified I'd disappear. I forgot the world. The rain. Even my name. It was a collision of everything we weren't supposed to be, fear, longing, defiance, all tangled in the space between two heartbeats. When we finally pulled apart, the silence that followed was deafening. He looked at me, breathing hard, guilt and hunger warring behind his eyes. This can't happen again, he said. I wanted to believe him. You don't sound convinced. He laughed softly, a sound that wasn't joy but surrender. Because I'm not. He stepped back, dragging a hand through his hair, as if distance could undo what had just happened. You should go, Lena. But I didn't move. What are you so afraid of? He met my gaze, voice low, raw. That you'll make me want something I can't have. And what if I already do? His silence was the answer. Outside, thunder cracked, shaking the windows. He turned away, as if the sound grounded him. Daniel doesn't deserve this betrayal. You know that. My throat tightened. No one deserves any of this. He exhaled sharply. You're right. But we did it anyway. For a moment, I thought he might reach for me again. Instead, he walked to the window, hands braced on the frame. His reflection looked fractured against the lightning, two versions of him caught between control and confession. Go, he said softly, before I stop pretending I can let you. I stepped toward the door, each movement heavier than the last. The air still smelled of rain and regret. At the threshold, I turned. You think this will make it easier? He didn't look back. No. But it'll keep you alive. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just about love or guilt or power. It was about survival. And sometimes, survival meant choosing the wound over the cure. I left him standing there, alone, framed by thunder and glass. By the time I reached the street, the rain had turned to mist. The city lights blurred, and I realized my hands were shaking. I touched my lips, half expecting to feel guilt instead of warmth. But what lingered wasn't regret. It was something far more dangerous. Hope. The next morning, Daniel called. His voice was sharp, restless. You haven't seen Adrian lately, have you? I froze. Why? He hesitated. He's been acting strange. Quiet. Like he knows something I don't. My chest constricted. Maybe he's just tired. Daniel laughed under his breath. Adrian Moretti doesn't get tired, Lena. He plots. The line went dead a second later, but his words stayed with me. That night, I stood by the window again, watching rain trace thin rivers down the glass. Every drop felt like a confession I couldn't make. I didn't know where this path would lead, only that it had already begun, and turning back was no longer possible. The kiss had changed everything. Not because it happened, but because it felt like it was always meant to. By dawn, I made myself a promise. I would survive this. Even if surviving meant losing both men who defined my fate. I didn't see him for 2 weeks after that night. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. Adrian had vanished into silence. No calls, no texts, no shadows of him in Daniel's orbit. The city still whispered his name, but quietly now, like a secret everyone was afraid to say aloud. Daniel, meanwhile, became restless. His mood shifted like weather, bright one moment, storming the next. He spoke faster, slept less, and carried a tension I could feel in every word. Something was unraveling, and I was standing in the middle of it. The first sign came one evening when Daniel burst through the door, phone clutched in his hand, eyes wild. We need to leave town for a few days. I looked up from the couch. Why? Business. Daniel. He cut me off, pacing. Just pack a bag, Lena. Adrian's being paranoid again, pulling strings he shouldn't. I don't want you caught in the middle. The name hit harder than it should have. What do you mean, paranoid? He stopped, jaw tightening. He's been warning people about an attack that doesn't exist. Spooking clients, freezing accounts, like he wants to burn his own empire down. I stayed quiet. Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He's losing it. I think the pressure's finally getting to him. If only he knew how wrong he was. Adrian wasn't losing control. He was bracing for it. And I was the reason why. I found out the truth 2 nights later. Unable to stand the silence, I went to the gallery, the only place that had ever felt like his. But it was empty. No candles, no paintings, no traces of him. Only the echo of my footsteps and the faint scent of smoke, like something had ended here. I should have left. But instead, I followed the sound of a door creaking open behind me. A voice I didn't recognize murmured, "She's here." Before I could turn, another replied, colder, sharper, "Let her wait." I froze. My heart thudded hard against my ribs. Then I saw him, Adrian, stepping out of the shadows. His suit was dark, but his eyes were darker. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low. I was worried. "Don't be." His tone was clipped, distant. "You disappeared," I said, the words trembling out. "After that night." "Forget that night." The words sliced cleanly between us. "I can't." "You have to." He looked past me, to the men waiting in the corner. "Leave us." When we were alone, the silence grew sharp. He walked closer, slow, deliberate, his gaze unreadable. "Daniel's in deeper than he knows. I told you before, there are no sides left to stand on. And when it breaks, I don't want you near it. You're pushing me away. I'm saving you." By pretending it didn't happen? His jaw tightened. "It can't happen again." "That's not an answer." He turned sharply, walking toward the door. "Go home, Lena." I followed. "You think this protects me? You think distance will erase what you feel?" He stopped then, so suddenly I nearly collided with him. When he looked at me, The calm broke. For the first time, I saw the storm he carried, the guilt, the hunger, the ache. "It's not what I feel that'll destroy you," he said softly. "It's what I am." He reached out, fingers brushing the side of my face once briefly, then dropped his hand as if the contact burned. "Don't come here again," he whispered. "Not for me." He left me standing in the echo of his footsteps, staring at the space where his shadow had been. Days turned to nights without color. Daniel grew distant. Adrian grew invisible. I tried to bury myself in routine, work, errands, pretense, but everything I touched felt hollow. Every reflection carried the shape of him. Then, one evening, as the sun bled red into the skyline, a car pulled up outside my apartment. A man I didn't recognize stepped out, dressed in black, rain dripping from his hair. "Miss Hart." I hesitated. "Yes." He handed me a phone. He said you'd want to hear it from him. Static filled the line first, then his voice. "Lena." I gripped the phone tighter. "Adrian. Listen carefully. Daniel's being watched. He's meeting with someone he shouldn't. Don't go home tonight." My stomach dropped. "What's happening?" "I can't explain now. Just trust me." "Where are you?" Silence. Then, "Farther than I should be. Closer than I want." The line went dead. I stood there in the rain, heart pounding, the words looping in my head. "Don't go home tonight." By midnight, Daniel still hadn't answered my calls. I sat by the window, watching lightning trace the sky, wondering if I was protecting him, or lying to him. When the knock came at the door, I startled. It wasn't Adrian. It was one of his men, Marco, the quiet one I'd seen once at the club. His expression was grave. "He told me to stay with you," Marco said. "Why?" "In case things go bad." He didn't have to say what things meant. Hours passed. The rain never stopped. And somewhere, out in that endless city, Adrian was fighting a war he refused to name. At dawn, I finally got a message. One line, sent from an untraceable number. "It's done." No name. No explanation. But I knew it was him. I didn't know what done meant, only that it sounded like loss. When I saw him again, it was days later. At a funeral. Daniel's associate, someone high up in the chain of their business, had been found dead. The papers called it a robbery gone wrong. But I knew better. Adrian stood by the graveside, expression carved in stone. No emotion. No grief. Just silence. When our eyes met across the crowd, the world narrowed to a single breath. He didn't move. Neither did I. But in that stillness, I understood everything. The distance. The warning. The silence. He was already tearing himself apart so the world wouldn't have to. That night, I wrote his name on a piece of paper and burned it. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I knew I never could. The ash curled like smoke in the wind, rising, vanishing, leaving behind only the faint scent of what used to be. I told myself this was the end. But endings are just pauses in stories too dangerous to finish. And somewhere in the dark, I could still feel him. Watching, waiting, breaking in silence. The city felt colder after the funeral. Even the light seemed different, muted, thin, stripped of warmth. People whispered names in corners, but no one spoke them too loudly. Fear had a new face now, and it wore Adrian Moretti's. Daniel came home that night smelling like smoke and whiskey. His tie was missing, his eyes red-rimmed. "You heard about Rossi?" I nodded carefully. "The news said robbery." He laughed once, bitterly. "News says a lot of things. Adrian says another." Something in his voice made my stomach twist. "What do you mean?" He poured himself a drink, the glass trembling slightly. Adrian killed him. I froze. What? Not with his hands. He never has to. But he ordered it. Daniel's mouth curled into a humorless smile. You don't get to be him without burying a few people under your empire. I stared at him. And you're surprised? He looked at me sharply. You sound like you approve. I don't. My voice came out steadier than I felt. But I stopped believing in clean hands a long time ago. He studied me, eyes narrowing. You've changed. I wanted to deny it, but he was right. I had. Because somewhere between his world and Adrian's, I'd lost the version of myself who still believed love could stay pure. That night, I couldn't sleep. The storm outside had moved on, leaving only the sound of dripping water from the eaves. I stood by the window, staring at the city that seemed to breathe without rest. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. He's not wrong. I knew the voice even through text. Adrian, where are you? Nowhere safe. Did you do it? Would it change what you think of me if I said yes? I don't know what I think anymore. Good. It means you're still honest. I wanted to throw the phone, scream, anything, but instead I just stood there, reading the words again and again until they blurred. The next morning, the world moved on like nothing had happened. Daniel went back to work. The city resumed its heartbeat. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something invisible was watching, waiting. By late afternoon, I got the call that proved it. Lena Hart. A deep voice asked. Yes. This is Detective Alvarez, Organized Crime Division. We'd like you to come in for some questions regarding your fiancé's business dealings. The world tilted slightly. My fiancé? Yes, ma'am. Daniel Reed. There are inconsistencies in his financial statements, and your name appears on some accounts. Nothing serious. We just need clarity. My blood went cold. I don't know anything about that. That's fine. We'll talk tomorrow. When the line ended, I stood there frozen, the silence pressing against my chest. Daniel had always been ambitious. But I'd never imagined his ambition could destroy us. That night, I met Adrian. Not by plan, by instinct. He found me near the river, standing under a bridge where the lights didn't reach. He stepped out of the shadows, coat collar turned up against the wind, eyes unreadable. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. I got a call from the police. He didn't react. I know. My breath caught. You know. I warned Daniel. He didn't listen. Anger flared through the fear. You could have stopped him. His expression hardened. I'm not his keeper. No, you're his boss. I'm his shield, he said, voice low and sharp. Or I was. He's made choices even I can't cover for anymore. Then why warn me? His eyes flicked toward the dark river. Because you're not part of this, no matter how much you think you are. I stepped closer. And what if I don't want to be protected anymore? Then you'll die like the rest of them. The words hit like a slap. He didn't mean them cruelly. He meant them truthfully. He took a step forward, close enough that I could see the tension carved into his features. You don't understand what's coming, Lena. Rossi was only the first. There's another group moving in. They want Daniel gone, and they'll use anyone close to him to send a message. You mean me? His silence was answer enough. I can handle myself. His jaw clenched. Don't say that. Why not? Because you can't. And because hearing you say it makes it harder for me to do what I have to. What do you have to do? He exhaled, a sound somewhere between frustration and despair. End this before it touches you. The rain began again, light, hesitant, like the world itself was listening. "You think you can fix everything alone," I said quietly. He looked at me, and for the first time, his voice broke. "I don't know how to do anything else." Something inside me cracked then, not from fear, but from the weight of seeing him human. "You're bleeding, Adrian," I whispered. "You just hide it better than everyone else." He gave a faint, hollow smile. "And you keep touching wounds you shouldn't." I stepped closer. "Then let me." The words came out before I could stop them. He looked at me like he wanted to believe I could save him. But then his gaze shifted past me, to the shadows moving at the edge of the street. "Get in the car," he said suddenly. "What? Now?" I turned, and in that split second, saw what he saw. 2 figures approaching, slow, deliberate. He pulled me behind him, one hand reaching inside his coat. The sound that followed wasn't cinematic. It was real. Sharp. Fast. Echoing through the dark. I didn't know who fired first. I only knew Adrian moved with precision that didn't look human. When the noise stopped, the world was silent again, except for the ringing in my ears and the smell of gunpowder. He turned to me, breathing hard. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, heart pounding. Who were they?" "Warnings," he said simply. He wiped blood, someone else's, from his sleeve, then looked at me, voice low, controlled but frayed at the edges. "Now you understand why I kept you away." I didn't answer. Couldn't. He looked at me one last time, eyes dark with something I couldn't name. "Go home. And if anyone asks, you never saw me tonight." "Adrian." "Please," he said, the word breaking in the middle. Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain, leaving only silence and the faint outline of chaos behind him. That night, as I stood under the shower, I watched red swirl down the drain. Not mine, but still real enough to haunt me. The city outside glowed faintly through the fogged glass, and I realized what he'd meant all along. Power wasn't protection. It was just a slower way to lose everything you love. By morning, the news reported another death, an associate of known businessman Adrian Moretti. Daniel didn't come home that night. And I stopped pretending I didn't know why. Daniel never came home. Not that night. Not any night after. They found his car 2 days later on the edge of the river. Doors open, engine running, no trace of him. The papers called it an accident. The police called it suspicion. I called it consequence. People came and went for days. Questions, condolences, rumors. But none of it felt real. I existed in a kind of fog, the world muffled, voices dull. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't grieving, but because I didn't know who I was grieving for, the man Daniel had been, or the one he became. When the news broke, Adrian disappeared again. No messages. No sightings. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished with the storm that took everything else. And yet, I still felt him. In the quiet. In the air. In the way the city refused to rest. 3 months passed before I saw him again. It happened on an ordinary evening, the kind that disguises fate in routine. I was leaving the bookstore near the pier when I caught a glimpse of a familiar shadow across the street. He was standing beneath a flickering streetlight, hands in his coat pockets, hair damp from the drizzle. The sight of him felt like being hit by memory and relief all at once. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he spoke. "You look different." "So do you," I said softly. He gave a faint smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "I doubt that. You're alive." "Barely." The words lingered between us. I crossed the street slowly, every step heavy with everything left unsaid. "Where have you been?" He looked past me toward the water, cleaning up the mess Daniel left. Was it his fault? "No," he said quietly, "but it was his choice." There was no anger in his tone. Just resignation. He turned back to me. I told you once that this world doesn't forgive mistakes. I remember. It still doesn't. I studied his face, the lines sharper now, the calm colder. He looked older, not in years, but in weight. You came back, I said. I never left. His eyes met mine. Not really. Something in me broke at that. I tried to hate you, I whispered. He gave a small, humorless laugh. You wouldn't be the first. I couldn't. I know. The honesty in his voice was quiet, devastating. We walked along the pier in silence for a while. The city stretched behind us, lights shimmering across the black water. You should have told me the truth sooner, I said finally. About Daniel. About everything. If I had, you would have run. Maybe I should have. Maybe. He looked at me. But you didn't. I stopped walking. Why didn't you? He hesitated. Because walking away from you felt worse than staying in hell. My chest tightened. He took a step closer, the faint scent of rain and smoke surrounding him. I thought keeping you out of this would save you. But all I did was make you part of it anyway. You didn't make me anything. My voice trembled. I chose this. He reached out then, slowly, carefully, as if afraid I'd break. His fingers brushed a strand of hair from my face, the touch light but grounding. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said. I didn't offer it. He smiled faintly. Good. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of salt and metal. I looked out at the water, its surface rippling like glass. What happens now? I asked. He followed my gaze. Now, we rebuild what's left. And what's left? He was silent for a long time before answering. You. The word fell softly, but it hit with the force of everything we'd lost. Later, we sat on a bench overlooking the harbor, the world quiet except for the rhythmic hum of the city. I keep thinking about that night, I said. The last one, before everything fell apart. His jaw tightened. Don't. I can't help it. I looked down at my hands. It felt like the beginning of something, not the end. It was both. When I met his eyes, I saw it, the weight of every decision he'd ever made, every life he'd taken, every secret he'd buried. I don't want to be part of this world anymore, I said quietly. Yours. Daniel's. Any of it. I know. Then help me leave it. He studied me for a long moment. You think I can walk away that easily? No, I said. But I think you want to. The silence that followed was almost tender. Finally, he said, there's a safe house outside the city. I can send you there. I'm not asking to hide. Then what are you asking for? Freedom, I said simply. And peace. For both of us. He looked at me like I'd asked for something sacred. Peace isn't something people like us get to have, Lena. Then we steal it, I whispered. He smiled, tired, sad but real. You always did have a way with impossible things. The sky began to lighten then, soft streaks of dawn cutting through the clouds. I thought you'd hate me for what happened to Daniel, he said. I did, I admitted. For a while. And now? Now I think you were the only one who ever told me the truth. He looked away, voice barely audible. The truth doesn't save anyone. No, I said. But it's what we have left. He turned toward me, eyes tired but steady. You still trust me? I never stopped. That seemed to undo something in him. He exhaled slowly, as though releasing years of restraint. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The city hummed around us, indifferent to the small miracle of two people still standing after everything. Finally, he said, "If I walk away, I'll always be looking over my shoulder." "Then stop looking back," I said. He smiled faintly. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't." But neither was surviving. He nodded once. "Then maybe it's time to stop surviving." When we parted, the sun was rising, soft light spilling across the water, washing the city clean for a moment it didn't deserve. He didn't say goodbye. Neither did I. We didn't need to. Some connections don't end, they just change shape. As I walked away, I knew we would find each other again. Not as what we were, but as what we'd become. Survivors. Because love doesn't die when it loses its name. It simply learns to speak quieter. Weeks passed after that night on the pier. The city began to breathe again, as if tragedy had become part of its rhythm. The papers wrote Daniel's story into silence, turning his disappearance into a footnote. But I never stopped hearing the echo of Adrian's voice, the way he said peace isn't something people like us get to have. I tried to build a new life in the small apartment I'd moved into across the river. Different street, different light, different name on the mailbox. It didn't matter. His world had followed me anyway, in the whispers, the sudden shadows, the feeling that someone was always watching. Then, one morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name, written in black ink I recognized instantly. Inside. "Meet me at the place where the sky breaks." No signature. He didn't need one. The place was the old observatory on the city's outskirts, long abandoned, its glass dome cracked, its corridors echoing with ghosts of light. When I arrived, the air smelled like dust and rain. He was already there. Standing beneath the open roof, surrounded by fragments of glass that caught the fading sunlight like broken stars. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked the same, and yet not. The calm that used to be armor now looked more like exhaustion. "You shouldn't have come," he said softly. I almost smiled. "You wrote the invitation." He turned then, eyes catching the last light. "I didn't think you'd still listen." "I stopped listening a long time ago," I said. "But you don't write to me unless it matters." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "It matters." I waited. He hesitated, and that hesitation scared me more than any truth could. Finally, he said it. "Daniel didn't stumble into my world by accident." My heart stilled. "What do you mean?" "I brought him in." The words didn't make sense at first. They hung there, suspended in the fading light. "You what?" He looked down, jaw tight. "I recruited him. Years ago. Before you ever met him." The air around me seemed to vanish. "Why?" "He had skills I needed. Access, connections. But more than that, he owed me." "Owed you?" He nodded once. "His father. Debt. Old, ugly, and dangerous. I cleaned it. Gave him a new start. He was supposed to pay me back with loyalty." I took a step back. So Daniel, everything he had, came from me. My chest constricted. "Does that mean I—" He cut me off gently. "No. You were never part of the deal." I shook my head. "Then why does it feel like I was?" "Because he used you," Adrian said quietly. "He wanted out. He thought marrying you would make him look untouchable, respectable. I didn't stop him because I didn't see the danger soon enough." My pulse hammered. "Danger?" Adrian's voice lowered. "Daniel was selling information. My information. To men who wanted me dead." The words hit like a slow, steady burn. "So that's why he disappeared." Adrian didn't answer. I took another step closer, anger and grief twisting together. "You killed him." He didn't move. No. You're lying. His eyes met mine, grey and unflinching. I didn't have to. He chose the river before they could choose for him. Silence. Only the sound of wind pushing through the shattered glass. He continued quietly. I tried to stop him. He called me before it happened. Said he couldn't live with what he'd done. By the time I found him, he stopped. The words fractured. I felt the tears before I realized I was crying. He looked at me, voice breaking. I never meant for any of this to touch you. But it did, I whispered. You touched my life before I ever knew your name. He stepped closer. I didn't plan that, Lena. Didn't you? My voice trembled. You said it yourself. You recruited him. You knew who he was, what he wanted, what he'd do. You built the cage and then wondered why we couldn't breathe. He flinched, just barely. You think I don't hate myself for that? He said, voice sharp with pain. You think I wanted to fall for the one person who'd make me remember everything I've done wrong? Then why tell me now? Because you deserve the truth. I stared at him, searching his face for something. Remorse, relief, anything that would make this hurt less. And what am I supposed to do with it? Whatever you want. You expect me to forgive you? No, he said softly. I expect you to walk away. The light through the broken glass dimmed, casting him in shadow. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to forget him. But all I could do was see him, all of him, the man, the mistakes, the loneliness he'd hidden behind power. He took another step forward. I loved you, Lena. My breath caught. He continued, voice raw. Not the way I was supposed to. Not the way someone like me is allowed to. But I did. Stop. I can't. Because it's too late, I said. Because now love is just another lie between us. He shook his head. No. It's the only truth left. The wind outside picked up, sweeping through the open dome, carrying dust and fragments of starlight across the floor. I can't hate you, I whispered. Then hate what I've done. I already do. He gave a faint, broken smile. Good. We stood there, caught between confession and consequence. Finally, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small silver key. He pressed it into my palm. What's this? A way out, he said. Safe house on the coast. Money. New identity if you need it. Don't come back here. And you? I'm staying. I shook my head. You'll die here. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's the point. No, I said, voice trembling. You don't get to die to make this right. Then tell me, what does make it right? The question hung there, impossible. I closed my hand around the key, the metal cold against my skin. Living, I said finally. You make it right by living with what you've done. Every day. For a long time, he didn't move. Then, quietly, he said, You're stronger than me. No, I whispered. I just learned from you. He smiled then, small, genuine, heartbreaking. When I turned to leave, his voice followed, soft and final. Lena. I looked back. If I ever find peace, he said, it'll be because you showed me what it looks like. The words lodged somewhere deep, where forgiveness and pain coexist. As I stepped out into the fading light, I didn't look back. Because some stories don't end with closure. They end with truth, and that's harder to survive. That night, I drove until the city lights disappeared behind me. The key rested in my palm, heavy and cold. And though I told myself I was leaving everything behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that part of me was still walking beside him, through a world built on silence and consequence. I left the city. Or at least, I thought I did. For 3 months, I lived by the coast in a quiet town where the air tasted of salt instead of smoke. I painted again, badly but honestly. I read until the words blurred and listened to the sea until it stopped sounding like his voice. But peace doesn't last when it's borrowed. Not when it comes from the kind of man whose world is built on blood. The first sign was a headline. Mysterious explosions rock financial district, multiple casualties suspected. The photo beneath it was unmistakable. A familiar tower swallowed by fire, its glass and steel glowing orange against the night. Moretti Industries. The second sign was a phone call. No voice, no message, just static. But I recognized the silence. Adrian's silence had a shape to it, heavy, deliberate, final. By dusk, I was driving back to the city. Every turn of the wheel felt like crossing a line I'd promised not to. When I reached the outskirts, smoke stained the skyline. The streets near the tower were cordoned off, flashing lights bouncing off the wet pavement. People moved like ghosts, faces pale, voices hushed. I pushed through the crowd until a man in a black coat stopped me. "You can't go in there, miss." "I'm looking for someone," I said, my voice thin. "So is everyone." He didn't recognize me, and I didn't offer my name. Through the haze, I saw the building that used to be his fortress. The glass was gone. The gold lettering on the marble wall, Moretti and Co. hung by a single bolt, swinging in the wind. It looked like the world had finally caught up to him. Later, when I reached the only place left that still smelled like him, the old observatory, I found proof that he was alive. A cigarette, still burning in the ashtray. A glass half full of whiskey. And a folded sheet of paper on the table. It wasn't a letter. It was a list. Names. Some I recognized, men who'd toasted him at dinners, who'd called him boss with reverence. Others were strangers. All of them crossed out in ink. All but one. Lena Hart. My name, underlined once. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I saw the note scrawled beneath it, faint but unmistakable. "Keep her out of it." I turned when I heard movement behind me. A voice I hadn't expected, lower, smoother, colder. "I wondered when you'd come back." It wasn't Adrian. It was Marco. His right hand. Only now, there was no loyalty in his eyes, just calculation. "Where is he?" I asked. Marco smiled without warmth. "You still think he's the hero in this story?" "Where is he?" "Gone," he said. "And if you're smart, you'll pretend you never knew him." I took a step forward. "You did this, didn't you?" He didn't deny it. He built an empire and forgot the one rule that keeps men like us alive: never trust anyone completely. My pulse quickened. "You betrayed him." "I freed him." "From what?" "From himself." The words chilled me more than the night air. I glanced past him to the edge of the room. Adrian's coat hanging on the back of a chair, blood smeared faintly across the sleeve. "You killed him." Marco tilted his head. "Not yet." I moved before I could think, grabbing the nearest thing I could. His lighter, thrown hard enough to catch him off guard. He flinched, and I ran. Down the stairwell, through the broken door, out into the cold. I didn't stop running until the streets opened up into the dark stretch of the harbor. That's where I saw him. Adrian. He was leaning against a car near the docks, his shirt torn, blood dark against the fabric. His eyes met mine like he'd been expecting me all along. "Lena," he said quietly. I reached him before I realized I was crying. "You're alive. For now." "What happened?" He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Betrayal. The only currency that never loses value." "Marco." He nodded once. "I built him, trained him, trusted him. That's on me. He swayed slightly, and I reached for him. He let me. For the first time, he didn't try to be invincible. I thought I could fix it, he murmured. But there's nothing left to fix. That's not true. He looked at me then, really looked. You shouldn't have come back. I couldn't stay away. He smiled faintly. Always the wrong choice, right? Maybe the only one that's real. He laughed once, a broken sound. God, I missed you. Then his expression shifted, something behind him catching his attention. Get down, he whispered. Before I could move, a gunshot split the air. The sound tore through the quiet, scattering the gulls from the water. Adrian shoved me to the ground, body covering mine. Another shot. Then silence. When he rolled away, there was blood on his hand. I grabbed his face, panic flooding through me. Adrian, look at me. He did. And he smiled. Told you this world doesn't forgive mistakes. Don't say that. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek with fingers that trembled. You're safe. That's all that matters. No, I whispered. You matter. He closed his eyes briefly, the kind of tired that comes from years, not hours. Promise me something. Anything. Leave this city. Don't come back. Not for me. Not for ghosts. I can't leave you. You already did once, he said gently. And it saved you. His hand fell away. Sirens echoed in the distance, closer, louder. I pressed my hand against his wound, desperate, shaking. Adrian, stay with me. Please. He didn't answer. But when the light from the approaching cars caught his face, I saw it, a faint curve at the corner of his mouth. Peace. Or maybe acceptance. Then the world dissolved into noise. They said later that the explosion at the docks destroyed everything. Cars, crates, evidence, bodies. No one could confirm if Adrian Moretti survived. Some swore they saw him board a boat before it went up in flames. Others said his body was never found. All I knew was that when the smoke cleared, the world felt quieter. Too quiet. And in that silence, I could still hear his last words. You're safe. That's all that matters. I moved again. Different name. Different life. But sometimes when I walk by the sea and the wind shifts just right, I swear I smell smoke and rain, and I know he's still out there, somewhere between death and redemption. Because men like Adrian Moretti don't die. They haunt. Months passed, though time didn't move in straight lines anymore. Some days I woke with the illusion of peace. Others, I woke searching for him in the half-light, heart racing as if I'd heard his voice in a dream. I told myself he was dead. It was easier that way. But part of me refused to believe it. Because the sea never returned his body, and men like Adrian Moretti don't vanish without reason, they retreat. Still, I tried to build something that resembled a life. I moved to a town 2 hours north, quiet and faceless. I found a job at a small gallery overlooking the ocean. The days blurred, paint, coffee, strangers' laughter. Normal things. Human things. And yet, every time I locked the door at closing, I felt him there, somewhere between memory and guilt. One afternoon, an older woman came into the gallery. She stopped before a canvas, a rough, abstract painting in grey and red tones, and said, "You must have loved him very much." I froze. What? She smiled gently, eyes knowing. Only people who've lost someone paint like that. There's too much ache in the lines. It doesn't come from imagination. Her words lingered long after she left. That night, I stared at the painting until I saw him in it, the curve of his jaw hidden in shadow, the suggestion of a storm behind the stillness. He'd said once that power wasn't about choice, it was about consequence. Maybe love was the same. Winter came early that year. The wind off the sea carried the smell of iron and salt, like the air before rain. One night, as I locked the gallery, I saw a man standing across the street. Tall, dark coat, face hidden by shadow. My breath caught, but when I blinked, he was gone. It happened again the next night. And the night after. Always distant. Always watching. The old panic returned, crawling up my spine. Was it him, or the ghost of what I'd done? I left the lights off when I got home. The quiet of my apartment wrapped around me like a confession. I poured a glass of wine, stared at the reflection of the sea through the window, and whispered, "If you're out there, just let me go." But the waves didn't answer. A week later, the gallery received an anonymous delivery. A single wooden crate, no sender's name. Inside was a painting. When I pulled away the cloth, my heart stopped. It was the observatory. The same cracked glass, the same view of the city bleeding into night. And in the corner, a figure painted in shadow, barely visible but unmistakable. Adrian. There was a note taped to the frame. "You said living makes it right. I'm trying." I sank to the floor, the letter trembling in my hands. He was alive. Somewhere in the world, he was still trying. And maybe that was enough. After that, I started walking to the pier every evening. Not waiting, just being. The sun would fall behind the horizon, the sea turning black and gold, and I'd imagine him out there, somewhere beyond the waterline, still fighting his way back to the light. Some nights, I'd speak to him softly, as if the wind could carry words across the distance. "I forgive you," I said once. "Not because you deserve it, but because I need to." And somehow, the world felt lighter after that. Spring returned slowly. The air warmed, and so did I. The gallery began hosting small local shows, and one morning I found myself surrounded by laughter again, real, unscripted laughter. I was helping a young artist hang his pieces when he asked, "Do you believe people can change?" The question hit harder than it should have. I thought of Adrian, of the man who'd built an empire from violence and lost it to love. Of the one who taught me that redemption doesn't arrive all at once. It's earned in quiet moments, in every decision not to destroy. "Yes," I said finally. "But not overnight. Change is slower. Like healing, it hurts before it stops." The artist nodded, satisfied. But I wasn't speaking to him. Later that night, as I walked home, I stopped by the edge of the boardwalk. The sea was calm, silver under the moonlight. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel haunted. I felt connected. Because maybe redemption wasn't about finding peace. Maybe it was about learning to live with what you can't undo, and still choosing gentleness anyway. A few weeks later, another letter arrived. No name. Just the same handwriting. "You were right. Living hurts more. But it's worth it." Beneath it, a single postscript. "If you ever need me, look east at dawn." I smiled through the tears I hadn't realized were there. I didn't go looking. Not yet. Some distances are meant to hold the weight of what was lost. But I kept the note pinned above my bed, a reminder that love can survive the wreckage, not as fire but as light. By summer, the gallery had a new exhibit. I named it Reconstruction. People came, wandered, lingered. They said the art felt hopeful, like something broken learning how to breathe again. When the show closed, I stood in the empty room, sunlight slanting through the glass, and whispered, "I did it, Adrian. I lived." The wind rattled the door gently, as if answering. And in that moment, I knew that wherever he was, whether on land, sea, or in the quiet edges of memory, he'd heard me. Because redemption isn't a place you reach. It's a promise you keep. It was almost a year since the fire. Since the dock, the betrayal, the sound of his voice fading beneath sirens. The city had healed on the surface, new towers, new faces, but I knew better. The wounds were still there, buried under glass and gold. And then the message came. Not a letter this time, but a phone call from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, the silence on the other end felt too familiar to be coincidence. Then, his voice. Lena. The world stopped. Adrian. I need you to listen carefully. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear. You're alive. For now, he said. Marco's still alive too. The name chilled me. How? He built a new network. Quiet, but dangerous. He wants what's left of the city. And he wants me out of the way. You can't go back there, I said. He hesitated. He's not after me this time. He's after you. The words hit like ice water. Why me? Because he knows what you mean to me. I closed my eyes, the sound of the sea outside my window suddenly deafening. Where are you? The observatory, he said softly. One last time. The night was clear when I arrived. No rain, no fog, just sharp moonlight cutting across the cracked dome. He stood where I'd first seen him months ago, silhouetted against the horizon. Time hadn't softened him. It had carved him sharper, less myth, more man. You shouldn't have called me, I said. I couldn't let him find you first. Then let's leave. Now. He gave a faint smile. It's too late for that. I stepped closer, anger breaking through fear. You always decide what's too late for both of us. His eyes softened. I'm sorry. I've made a lifetime of bad choices. But this one, I needed you to see it through. See what? Before he could answer, a sound split the silence, the distant growl of engines, headlights cutting through the trees below. Marco, Adrian said quietly. Everything after that moved too fast. The vehicles stopped near the base of the hill. Men stepped out, shadows carrying steel. The observatory lights flickered once, then died completely. Adrian reached into his coat, pulling out something small and metallic. A switch, connected to the wires snaking across the floor. What is that? Insurance, he said. If they make it up here, they don't leave. You're not doing this, I said, panic rising. He met my gaze. I have to. No, you don't. You told me living makes it right, remember? His hand tightened on the switch. I remember everything you ever said. I stepped closer, close enough to see the tremor in his fingers. Then remember this too, if you die tonight, all of this dies with you. Every truth, every chance at peace. He hesitated, breath uneven. Below us, voices shouted, orders, footsteps, getting closer. Adrian, please. He looked at me, something breaking in his eyes. You were never supposed to love me. And yet I do, I whispered. So stop trying to make it easier to lose you. He laughed softly, bitter and beautiful. You never learned to listen. And you never learned to stop saving people who don't want to be saved. The footsteps reached the stairs. Adrian turned toward the entrance, every trace of hesitation gone. Stay behind me. Not this time. Lena. I'm done watching you fight alone. He didn't argue, just gave me a look that said everything words couldn't. The door burst open. Marco entered first. He looked almost unrecognizable, slick, composed, eyes empty. You never learn, old friend, he said. Adrian's voice stayed calm. Funny. I was about to say the same. Marco smiled faintly. You could have ruled this city, but you let it burn for her. His eyes flicked toward me, cold and deliberate. Adrian moved instantly, placing himself between us. Leave her out of it. I can't, Marco said. She's the reason you became weak. Love isn't weakness. It is when it gets you killed. Marco raised his gun. I didn't think, I moved. The next moment was chaos, shouting, light, the sharp echo of gunfire. I hit the ground, ears ringing, the world spinning in slow motion. When the noise faded, I saw him, Adrian, standing over Marco, the weapon still smoking in his hand. It was over. Or so I thought. He turned to me slowly, eyes dark and unreadable. Are you hurt? I shook my head, voice shaking. No. You. He smiled faintly. Not yet. Then I saw it, the small red bloom spreading across his side. Adrian. He looked down, almost surprised. Guess I should have seen that coming. I rushed to him, pressing my hands against the wound. No, stay with me. He caught my wrist, gentle but firm. It's okay. Don't you dare say that. He leaned his forehead against mine, his breath uneven. You remember the first time we met? You were shaking. I let out a broken laugh. You noticed. I notice everything about you. Tears blurred my vision. You can't leave me like this. I'm not leaving, he whispered. Not really. Sirens wailed in the distance again, closer this time. The city had heard the noise, the chaos. Help's coming, I said desperately. You'll be fine. He smiled faintly. You still believe in rescue. I believe in you. His hand brushed my cheek, smearing blood across my skin. Then promise me one thing. Anything. Live. Even when it hurts. Especially then. I will. But not without you. He shook his head. You already know how. His voice faltered, but his gaze stayed steady, gray and endless like the sea. You showed me there's something stronger than power. What? Grace. Then his hand fell away. They said later that the explosion didn't destroy the observatory, just the vehicles below. The police found Marco's body but no trace of Adrian's. Some believed he died in my arms. Others said he disappeared into the smoke, the way legends do. All I knew was that when the sun rose, the light hit the broken glass and scattered into 1,000 pieces, like a crown made of fire. And for the first time, I understood what he meant. Power ends. Love transforms. I left the city at dawn. The air smelled of rain and renewal. As I drove toward the coast, the sky turned gold, and for a moment, I swore I saw him standing on the pier, coat whipping in the wind, watching me go. I didn't stop. Because this time, he didn't need me to. The sea is calm tonight. I sit on the worn boards of the old pier, the one I used to dream of leaving behind, and watch the horizon melt into silver. It's been months since the observatory burned, months since the city buried its ghosts beneath new lights and polished glass. But fire leaves a scent that never quite fades. My hands still tremble when thunder rolls, though the storms here are softer. Salt instead of smoke, memory instead of fear. People think healing looks like joy. It doesn't. It looks like quiet mornings, empty rooms, and the sound of your own breathing finally steady again. I live in a small house by the cliffs now, halfway between the town and the tide. I work at the gallery when they need me, paint when they don't. My neighbors know me as Lena Hart, the quiet woman who walks before sunrise. None of them ask about the scar along my arm or why I always face east when the day begins. Maybe they know better. Maybe they understand that some stories should end in whispers, not explanations. Sometimes when the fog rolls in, I imagine him stepping out of it. Adrian Moretti, unarmed for once, hands in his pockets, that half-smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. I used to think I saw him everywhere, in the man who sold newspapers at the dock, in the driver of a passing car, in the reflection of glass too quick to hold. But I've learned that memory can be merciful. It shows you what you need, not what's true. Still, I like to think he survived. That he's somewhere far from the city, rebuilding himself the way I did. Slowly, quietly, honestly. He once told me that power was just another word for consequence. Now I understand that love is the same. You don't escape it. You live with what it leaves behind. A letter arrived last week. No name, no address. Just a single line written in the handwriting I know by heart. East at dawn. No signature. No promise. Just direction. I keep it on the table by my bed. I haven't gone looking. Not yet. Because peace isn't found by chasing what you lost. It's found by standing still long enough to let what's meant for you return in its own time. Tonight, the tide is low. I walk along the waterline, shoes in my hand, the surf cool against my feet. The stars above look sharper here, unclouded by city light. I remember the first time I saw him, the glass office, the rain, the man who seemed untouchable. I remember every word, every silence, every moment that felt like a warning and a promise all at once. And I remember the last thing he said before the world went quiet. Live. Even when it hurts. I took that as an order once. Now I take it as grace. The gallery is preparing another exhibition next month. They've asked to use my paintings, the ones no one's seen. I said yes. Not because I want to be known, but because I finally can be. The collection has no title yet, but I know what it's about. Forgiveness. Not the clean kind people preach about. The messy kind. The kind that looks like waking up and realizing the world kept turning even when you're stopped. The kind that lets you breathe without the weight of what if. One of the paintings is of the sea at sunrise, grey fading into gold, endless and alive. In the corner, almost hidden, a shadowed figure stands on the horizon. I never told anyone who it is. I don't have to. This morning, I woke before dawn and made coffee strong enough to cut through the wind. The first light crept over the water, turning the waves pale blue. For a moment, everything felt suspended. Air, breath, time. Then I saw it. Far out, where the sky touched the sea, a small boat moving east. A single figure at the helm, head bowed against the wind. Too far to know for sure. Close enough to believe. I didn't wave. I didn't call out. I just watched until the horizon swallowed him whole. Because love like ours doesn't need witnesses. It just needs memory. The world is different now. Quieter. Softer. Kinder in ways I never expected. The kind of life that Adrian once said people like us could never have. He was wrong. We earned it, not through perfection, but through survival. And maybe that's what redemption really is, not erasing the past, but learning to live so that it doesn't own you anymore. When people ask what my story is, I tell them it's about debt and forgiveness. About two people who met in the wrong world and taught each other how to leave it. They ask if it has a happy ending. I smile and say, it has an honest one. The sun has fully risen now. The sea glitters like new glass, and for once, there's no shadow in its reflection. I take a deep breath, let the salt fill my lungs, and whisper the truth I've carried for years. He taught me that love is not what saves us. It's what makes the pain worth surviving. And somewhere out there, I know he hears it.